Part 1. The Big Day. The old bus shook as it hit another pothole on Main Street. Devin pressed his face against the scratched window and watched the city buildings get taller and fancier. His reflection stared back at him, a young black man in his best suit, which wasn't saying much. The navy blue jacket had seen better days, but his grandmother had pressed it so many times that it still looked decent enough for today. Today was different. Today could change everything. Devin clutched the manila folder in his lap like it contained gold. Inside were 3 copies of his resume, printed at the library because his printer had died months ago. He'd spent his last $5 on that printing, but it was worth it. This interview at Sterling and Associates could be his ticket out of the mess his life had become. 6 months. That's how long he'd been without a real job. 6 months of watching his savings disappear, of eating ramen noodles for dinner again, of lying awake at night wondering how he'd pay next month's rent. The warehouse job had been good while it lasted. Steady pay, decent hours, and he was good at organizing things. But when the company downsized, Devin was among the first to go. Last hired, first fired. Story of his life. The woman sitting across from him was reading a newspaper. The headline screamed something about the economy getting better, but Devin wasn't feeling it. He'd applied to 47 jobs in the past month. He knew the exact number because he kept a list in a notebook his grandmother had given him. Most places never called back. The ones that did usually took one look at him and found some excuse. "We'll call you" really meant, "Don't hold your breath." But Sterling and Associates was different. When the HR lady called yesterday, she sounded genuinely interested. She'd asked real questions about his experience, not just the usual, "Can you work weekends" stuff. She even mentioned that they were looking for someone with logistics background, which was exactly what he had. "Next stop, downtown business district," the bus driver announced. Devin's stomach jumped. This was it. He checked his phone. 1:15 p.m. Perfect timing. The interview was at 2:00, and according to his research on Google Maps, it would take him exactly 12 minutes to walk from the bus stop to the office building. He'd even practiced the route last weekend, walking it twice to make sure he knew where he was going. His grandmother always said preparation was half the battle. She'd been saying that since he was a kid, usually while helping him with homework at her kitchen table. "Devin, baby," she'd say, adjusting her reading glasses. "Success is what happens when preparation meets opportunity." Well, he was about as prepared as he could be. He'd researched the company online until his eyes hurt. Sterling and Associates had been around for 30 years, specializing in business consulting for mid-sized companies. They helped businesses run more efficiently, which sounded like something he could do. At the warehouse, he'd been the go-to guy when things got backed up or when shipments were coming in wrong. He could see problems before they happened and fix them before they got worse. The bus lurched to a stop. "Downtown business district," the driver called out again. Devin stood up, smoothing down his jacket. The older man next to him smiled and nodded. "Good luck with whatever you're doing, son. You look ready for success." "Thank you, sir. I hope so." Walking down the bus steps, Devin felt the warm afternoon sun on his face. The downtown area was busy with people in expensive suits walking fast and talking on phones. Everyone looked important, like they had somewhere urgent to be. Devin wanted to be one of those people. He wanted to matter, to have a job that meant something, to be able to help his grandmother with her medical bills instead of her always helping him. Grandma Rose had raised him since he was 8, after his parents died in a car accident. She'd worked double shifts at the hospital cafeteria to keep food on the table and clothes on his back. Now she was 73 and dealing with diabetes and high blood pressure. Her medications cost more each month than Devin's rent. She never complained, but he saw her counting pills, making them last longer than they should. That's what today was really about. Not just getting a job, but getting the kind of job that would let him take care of her the way she'd taken care of him. Devin walked past a coffee shop where people sat at small tables with laptops looking relaxed and professional. He'd never been the type to work in coffee shops. Too much noise, too many distractions. But he liked the idea of being the kind of person who could. Someone with flexibility, with options, The Sterling and Associates building was exactly like he remembered from his practice run. 15 stories of glass and steel with a fancy lobby that had marble floors and a security desk. Devin had never worked in a building like this. The warehouse had been all concrete and metal shelving, with a break room that smelled like old coffee and cigarettes. He stopped at a bench across the street and pulled out his phone. 1:27 p.m. Perfect. Right on schedule. He opened his folder one more time, checking that everything was there. Resume, references, the list of questions he wanted to ask them. His hands were steady, which surprised him. Usually he got nervous before important things, but today, he felt calm. Ready. A text message popped up on his phone. It was from his grandmother. "Praying for you, baby, you got this, call me after." Devin smiled and typed back, "Thanks, Grandma. Love you." He stood up and straightened his tie. It was a simple blue tie, nothing fancy, but it matched his suit. His grandmother had picked it out for him when he graduated high school. "Every man needs a good tie for important occasions," she'd said. "You never know when opportunity might knock." Looking up at the Sterling building, Devin took a deep breath. 6 months of job hunting, 47 applications, countless rejections. It all came down to the next hour. Either he'd walk out of there with a job, or he'd be back to checking the want ads tomorrow morning. But something felt different today. Maybe it was the way the HR lady had sounded on the phone, or maybe it was just that he'd been preparing so hard for so long. Whatever it was, Devin felt like this might be his moment. He checked his reflection in a store window one more time, then started walking toward the building. Each step felt important, like he was walking toward his future. The sun was warm on his back. People were bustling around him with purpose, and for the first time in months, Devin felt like he belonged in this picture. Today was going to be a good day. He could feel it. Part 2. The unexpected detour. Devin walked with purpose down Elm Street, his dress shoes clicking against the sidewalk in a steady rhythm. The Sterling building was just 3 blocks away now, and he had 32 minutes to spare. Perfect timing, just like he'd planned. He passed a flower shop where an older woman was arranging roses in the window, a small restaurant with the lunch crowd spilling onto the sidewalk, and a bookstore with stacks of novels displayed outside. This was the nicest part of downtown, where the trees were well maintained and the sidewalks were clean. Devin had grown up on the other side of the city, where the trees were sparse and the sidewalks had more cracks than concrete. But today, walking through this area in his best suit, he felt like he could belong here. Like maybe this was where his life was heading. He was mentally reviewing his talking points when he noticed the car. It was a black Mercedes, the kind that probably cost more than Devin had made in the past 2 years. But it wasn't the car that caught his attention. It was the fact that it was sitting at an odd angle on the side of the street, with its back end slightly raised. And standing next to it was an older white man in what looked like an expensive suit, though it was now wrinkled and had dust on it. The man appeared to be in his mid-60s, with gray hair and the kind of confident posture that came from years of being in charge. But right now he looked anything but confident. He was staring at the flat rear tire like it was some kind of alien object, occasionally walking around the car and then coming back to stare at the tire again. Devin's first instinct was to keep walking. He had an interview to get to. And getting involved in someone else's problem wasn't part of the plan. But as he got closer, he could see the frustration on the man's face. The guy kept pulling out his phone, looking at it, then putting it back in his pocket with an annoyed shake of his head. "Excuse me," the man called out as Devin approached. "I don't suppose you know anything about changing tires?" Devin slowed down but didn't stop. "A little bit, sir. Is your phone dead?" "Dead as a doornail," the man said, holding up his expensive-looking smartphone. "And I've got to be somewhere important in about 20 minutes. I called the auto club earlier, but they said it could be an hour or more." Devin checked his watch. 1:28 p.m. If he stopped to help, he'd definitely be cutting it close, maybe even late. His grandmother's voice echoed in his head. "Devin, baby, You always do what's right even when it's hard. That's what makes you who you are. But this wasn't just about doing what's right. This was about his future, his chance to finally get ahead, his opportunity to help his grandmother. He'd been preparing for this interview for weeks. He'd practiced answers in the mirror, researched every possible question, even bought new socks for the occasion. "I really need to get to an appointment," Devin said. But even as the words came out of his mouth, he could hear the uncertainty in his voice. The older man nodded, looking disappointed but understanding. "Of course I understand. I just thought maybe." He trailed off and went back to staring at the tire. Devin took 2 more steps, then stopped. He turned around and really looked at the man. The guy was probably somebody's grandfather. Maybe somebody's father who was supposed to be at his daughter's graduation or his grandson's birthday party. The expensive suit suggested he was successful, but success didn't teach you how to change a tire. "You know what?" Devin said, setting his folder down on a nearby bench. "Let me take a look." The relief on the man's face was immediate and genuine. "Really? Are you sure? I don't want to make you late for anything important." "It's fine," Devin said, though his stomach was already churning about the time. "I'm good with my hands and it shouldn't take too long." "I'm Robert, by the way," the man said, extending his hand. "Devin," he replied, shaking the offered hand. Robert's grip was firm but not aggressive, the kind of handshake that suggested he was used to meeting people and making good first impressions. "I really appreciate this, Devin. I've been standing here for 15 minutes feeling completely useless. I can run a board meeting, but apparently I can't figure out which end of a jack goes where." Devin smiled despite his growing anxiety about the time. "Don't worry about it. We all have different skills. Let me pop the trunk and see what we're working with." The trunk of the Mercedes was immaculate, with everything neatly organized in its proper place. The spare tire was there, along with a jack and a small toolkit. Everything they needed was present and accounted for, which was more than Devin could say for some cars he'd helped with in the past. "Okay, this should be pretty straightforward," Devin said, pulling off his suit jacket and laying it carefully on the bench next to his folder. "Do you mind holding some tools for me?" "Absolutely, just tell me what to do." As Devin loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, he tried not to think about the time. Tried not to imagine walking into Sterling and Associates 20 minutes, late, sweaty, and disheveled. Instead, he focused on the task at hand. The lug nuts were on tight, but not impossibly so. The jack was a nice one, better quality than he was used to working with. "So what kind of work do you do, Devin?" Robert asked as he held the lug wrench steady. "I'm between jobs right now," Devin said, putting his weight behind loosening a particularly stubborn nut. "I used to work at a warehouse doing logistics and inventory management. I'm actually on my way to a job interview when I saw you here." "Really? What kind of position?" "Business consulting. Sterling and Associates. They're looking for someone with operations experience." Devin glanced at his watch. 1:35 p.m. His chest tightened, but he kept working. "That sounds like a good opportunity," Robert said. "How long have you been looking?" "About 6 months now. It's been tough, you know. The job market's pretty competitive." Devin had the tire off now and was rolling the spare into position. "But this one feels different, like it might actually work out." Robert was quiet for a moment, watching Devin work. "You seem to know what you're doing, both with the tire and with life in general. My grandmother always taught me to be useful. She said you never know when someone might need help, and you never know who might be able to help you back someday." "Smart woman, your grandmother." "The smartest," Devin said, tightening the lug nuts on the spare tire. "She raised me after my parents died. Worked 2 jobs to make sure I had what I needed. Now she's getting older and her medical bills are piling up, so I really need this job to work out." "I'm sorry about your parents," Robert said quietly. "And it sounds like your grandmother did an incredible job raising you." Devin lowered the jack and stood up, wiping his hands on a rag he found in the trunk. His shirt was a little wrinkled now, and there were a few small grease stains on his sleeves, but the job was done. The spare tire looked good and solid. "There, you go," Devin said, checking his watch again. 1:42 p.m. His heart sank. Even if he ran, he'd be at least 10 minutes late. You should be all set. Just remember to get that tire repaired or replaced as soon as you can. Spares aren't meant for long-term driving. Robert walked around the car, inspecting Devin's work with obvious admiration. This is incredible. I can't thank you enough. Please, let me give you something for your trouble. He pulled out his wallet, but Devin shook his head. No, thank you, sir. I was happy to help. Are you sure? Gas money? Something for dry cleaning? Really, it's fine. Just pay it forward someday when you see someone else who needs help. Robert smiled and extended his hand again. Devin, you're a good man. I hope that interview goes well for you. Any company would be lucky to have someone with your character. Devin shook his hand, grabbed his jacket and folder, and started walking quickly toward the Sterling building. As he moved, he tried to calculate if there was any way to make up the time. Maybe if he walked really fast, maybe if they were running a few minutes behind schedule themselves. But deep down, he knew he was going to be late. And being late to a job interview was pretty much the kiss of death, especially when you were already fighting an uphill battle. Part 3. Getting his hands dirty. Devin rolled up his sleeves and knelt down beside the flat tire, trying to push away the growing panic about the time. 1:42 p.m. Even if everything went perfectly from here, he'd still be at least 15 minutes, late to the most important interview of his life. But he was committed now, and his grandmother had always taught him to finish what he started. Okay, Robert, I'm going to need you to help me with a few things, Devin said, his voice steady despite the churning in his stomach. Can you hold this lug wrench while I position the jack? Robert nodded eagerly, clearly grateful to be useful. Just tell me what to do. I may not know much about cars, but I can follow directions. Devin found himself appreciating Robert's honesty. A lot of people would have pretended to know more than they did, or would have stood around giving unhelpful advice. But Robert seemed genuinely interested in learning and helping however he could. The trick with jacking up a car, Devin explained as he positioned the jack under the frame, is finding the right spot. You want it to be solid metal, not something that's going to bend or break when you put weight on it. He tested the position, making sure it felt secure. My uncle taught me this when I was 16. He said every man should know how to change a tire, check his oil, and jump-start a battery. Sounds like a wise man, Robert said, handing Devin the lug wrench when he gestured for it. He was. He owned a small auto repair shop on the south side. Nothing fancy, but he took care of people in the neighborhood. He'd let folks pay him in installments if they couldn't afford the full bill up front. Devin started loosening the lug nuts before raising the car. He always said that being able to fix things was a superpower, because there's always something broken somewhere. As Devin worked, he found the repetitive motions calming. This was something he knew how to do, something he was good at. Unlike job interviews, which always felt like tests he wasn't sure he could pass, changing a tire was straightforward. There was a problem, and there was a solution, and if you had the right tools and knew the steps, you could fix it. So you mentioned, you're in logistics, Robert said, still holding tools as Devin needed them. What exactly does that involve? Devin paused in his work to wipe sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. Basically, it's about making sure things get where they need to go, when they need to be there. At the warehouse I managed, inventory systems, coordinated shipments, figured out the most efficient ways to organize everything. It sounds boring, but I actually loved it. Why did you love it? Robert asked, seeming genuinely curious. Because when it works right, everything flows smoothly. Like imagine you've got 1,000 different items coming in and going out every day, and somehow it all has to make sense. You've got to know what's coming when, where it needs to go, how long things take to process. It's like solving a big puzzle every day. Devin cranked the jack, slowly lifting the car. The spare tire was in good shape, which was a relief. Some people never checked their spares and only discovered they were flat when they needed them most. That actually doesn't sound boring at all, Robert said. It sounds like you have to think, several steps ahead, anticipate problems before they happen. Exactly, Devin said, his enthusiasm overriding his anxiety for a moment. Like if you know it's going to rain tomorrow, you might want to move certain deliveries to covered areas today. Or if you know a particular supplier is always 2 days late, you plan for that instead of being surprised by it every time. He had the flat tire off now and was rolling the spare into position. His shirt was getting dirty, and he was definitely going to need to wash his hands before the interview, but the work felt good. Productive. Like he was solving a real problem for a real person. The company I'm interviewing with today, Devon, continued. Sterling and Associates, they help businesses run more efficiently. I think my warehouse experience could translate well to that kind of consulting work. Instead of managing inventory, I'd be helping companies figure out better ways to manage their operations. Robert nodded thoughtfully as he watched Devon align the spare tire with the bolts. That makes a lot of sense. You'd be taking the problem-solving skills you developed in one environment and applying them to different situations. Right. And honestly, I think I'd be good at it. When things went wrong at the warehouse, I was usually the guy they called to figure out what happened and how to fix it. I liked that part of the job even more than the day-to-day stuff. Devon started threading the lug nuts back on, working methodically around the wheel. The hard part is convincing someone to give me a chance. A lot of these consulting firms want people with business degrees or experience at other consulting companies. They don't necessarily see how warehouse experience applies. That seems short-sighted, Robert said. Real operational experience is valuable. There's a difference between knowing something in theory and knowing it because you've actually done it. That's what I'm hoping they'll understand, Devon said, tightening the lug nuts in the proper star pattern his uncle had taught him. I may not have an MBA, but I've spent 3 years figuring out how to make complicated systems work better. That's got to count for something. Robert was quiet for a moment, watching Devon work. Can I ask you something personal? Sure. When you saw me standing here with this flat tire, what made you decide to stop? You obviously have somewhere important to be. Devon paused, considering the question. Honestly, my first instinct was to keep walking. I've been preparing for this interview for weeks, and being late could really hurt my chances. He lowered the jack, testing the spare tire to make sure it was secure. But then I thought about my grandmother. She always taught me that how you treat people when it's inconvenient says more about your character than how you treat them when it's easy. She sounds like a remarkable woman. She is. She's 73 now, and she's been dealing with some health issues. Diabetes, high blood pressure. The medications are expensive, and she's on a fixed income. Devon stood up and wiped his hands on the rag again. That's part of why I need this job to work out. I want to be able to help her the way she helped me when I was growing up. Robert's expression grew thoughtful. So you're risking being late to an interview that could help your grandmother in order to help a complete stranger with a flat tire? Devon shrugged. When you put it like that, it sounds kind of crazy, but I couldn't just walk past someone who needed help. That's not who I am. No, Robert said quietly. It's not crazy at all. It's admirable. Devon checked his watch again. 1:51 p.m. His heart sank. Even if he ran the remaining blocks, he'd be at least 20 minutes late. In his experience, being 20 minutes late to a job interview was pretty much an automatic disqualification. There you go, Devon said, packing the flat tire and tools back into the trunk. The spare should get you where you need to go, but remember to get the regular tire repaired as soon as possible. Spares aren't designed for long-term driving, and this one looks like it's been in your trunk for a while. Robert walked around the car, inspecting Devon's work. This is incredible. You've completely saved my day. I can't thank you enough. He reached for his wallet again, but Devon waved him off. Really, sir, I don't need anything. I'm just glad I could help. At least let me pay for your dry cleaning. You've gotten your clothes dirty helping me. Devon looked down at his shirt. There were definitely some grease stains that hadn't been there before, and his sleeves were wrinkled from being rolled up. But somehow, he didn't feel as worried about that as he thought he would. It's fine, he said with a genuine smile. Clothes can be cleaned. Besides, you said you had somewhere important to be too. You should get going. Robert shook his hand firmly. Devon, I want you to know that what you did today restored my faith in people. In a world where everyone seems to be looking out for themselves, you put someone else's needs ahead of your own. That means something. As Devon gathered his folder and jacket, he realized something surprising. Despite being late, despite potentially ruining his chances at the job, he felt good about his decision. Whatever happened at the interview, he'd be able to look at himself in the mirror tonight and know he'd done the right thing. "I hope your interview goes well," Robert called out as Devin started walking quickly toward the Sterling building. "Any company would be lucky to have you." Devin waved and broke into a jog, his dress shoes clicking rapidly against the pavement. He was definitely going to be late, but maybe, just maybe, they'd understand. Part 4. The Missed Opportunity. Devin jogged down the sidewalk as fast as he could in dress shoes, his folder clutched tightly against his chest. 1:53 p.m. The Sterling building was still 2 blocks away, and with each step, his chances of salvaging this interview seemed to shrink. His white shirt was sticking to his back with sweat, and he could feel the grease stains on his sleeves getting more noticeable as the fabric moved. He slowed to a fast walk as he approached the building, trying to catch his breath and look somewhat presentable. The last thing he needed was to show up not only late and dirty, but also gasping for air like he'd just run a marathon. Through the glass doors, he could see the elegant marble lobby he'd admired during his practice visit. Today, it felt less welcoming and more intimidating. The security guard at the front desk looked up as Devin approached. "Can I help you?" "Yes, sir. I have an appointment at Sterling & Associates. Devin Thompson for a 2 p.m. interview." The guard checked his computer screen, then looked at Devin with a slight frown. "Mr. Thompson, it's nearly 2 p.m. now. You're cutting it pretty close." "I know, sir. I had to help someone with an emergency." "Could you please call up and let them know I'm here?" The guard's expression softened slightly at the mention of an emergency. "Sure thing. Let me call the 14th floor." He picked up the phone and dialed. "Yes, this is security. I have a Devin Thompson here for a 2 p.m. appointment." "Yes, I'll hold." Devin tried to use the wait time to make himself more presentable. He smoothed down his hair, adjusted his tie, and tried to brush some of the dirt off his sleeves. It wasn't much, but it was all he could do. The marble floor beneath his feet was so polished he could see his reflection in it, which only made him more aware of how disheveled he looked. "Okay," the guard said, hanging up the phone. "You can go up. 14th floor, suite 1420. The elevators are right over there. Thank you." The elevator ride felt like it took forever. Devin watched the numbers climb, 4, 5, 6, and tried to prepare what he was going to say. How do you explain being late to a job interview? Even if helping Robert was the right thing to do, would they see it that way? Or would they just see someone who couldn't manage his time properly? The elevator dinged softly, and the doors opened, to reveal a pristine office hallway with thick carpeting and expensive-looking artwork on the walls. Suite 1420 was at the end of the hall, with Sterling & Associates, written in elegant gold letters on a frosted glass door. Devin took a deep breath and walked in. The reception area was everything he'd expected from his research about the company. Clean, professional, and clearly expensive. The receptionist, a woman in her 50s with perfectly styled gray hair, looked up from her computer as he approached. Her smile was polite but cool. "Mr. Thompson?" "Yes, ma'am. I'm here for my 2 p.m. appointment. I'm very sorry I'm running late. I had to help someone with a car emergency on the way here." The receptionist glanced at the clock on the wall, which showed 2:04 p.m. "I see. Well, punctuality is very important here at Sterling & Associates. Mr. Sterling has a very busy schedule, and he doesn't typically accommodate tardiness." Devin's heart sank, but he tried to keep his voice steady. "I completely understand, ma'am. Is there any chance he might still be able to see me? I've been preparing for this opportunity for weeks, and I really believe I could be a valuable addition to your team." The receptionist looked him up and down, taking in his wrinkled shirt and the grease stains on his sleeves. Her expression suggested she was not impressed. "Let me call back to his office and see if he's available." She picked up her phone and spoke in low tones. Devin could only catch fragments of the conversation, but none of it sounded promising. Words like late, unprofessional appearance, and already moved on to other appointments drifted across the desk. After what felt like an eternity, she hung up and looked at Devin with what might have charitably been called sympathy. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson, but Mr. Sterling has already left for another appointment. He had to leave at 2:40 p.m. sharp to make a board meeting across town. Devin felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. 6 months of job hunting, weeks of preparation, and it all came down to being 4 minutes late. Is there any possibility of rescheduling? I know I don't look very professional right now, but if you could just give me another chance. Well, the receptionist said, her tone suggesting she was doing him a significant favor. I could possibly fit you in next Friday at 3 p.m. But I have to warn you, Mr. Sterling doesn't give many second chances. If you're late again, or if your appearance isn't up to our standards, there won't be a third opportunity. Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Next Friday at 3 p.m. I'll be here 15 minutes early, and I promise I'll be properly dressed. She made a note in her appointment book, but Devin could tell from her body language that she didn't think he'd be worth the time. Your full name again? Devin Thompson. Thompson. And do you have a phone number where we can reach you if anything changes? Devin rattled off his number, which he wrote down with the air of someone going through the motions. He had the distinct feeling that if anything changed, it would be to cancel his appointment, not to reschedule it earlier. Thank you so much for accommodating me, Devin said. I really appreciate the second chance. The receptionist replied, already turning back to her computer. We'll see you next Friday. Please make sure you're on time. Devin left the office feeling like he was walking through a fog. The elevator ride down seemed to take even longer than the ride up, and when he stepped back out into the lobby, the marble floors and expensive lighting felt mocking rather than impressive. He pushed through the glass doors and found himself back on the street where his day had started with so much promise. The afternoon sun was still shining. People were still walking by with purpose, but somehow everything looked different now. Less bright, less full of possibility. Devin walked slowly to a nearby bus stop and sat down on the bench. He pulled out his phone and stared at it for a long moment before calling his grandmother. Hey, Grandma. Devin. Baby, how did it go? Tell me everything. Devin closed his eyes and leaned back against the bench. It didn't go well, Grandma. I was late and they couldn't see me. Late? Honey, you left so early. What happened? Devin told her about Robert and the flat tire. About the choice he'd had to make, about arriving at the office 4 minutes too late and looking like he'd been working on a car instead of going to an interview. When he finished, there was silence on the other end of the phone for a moment. Then his grandmother's voice came through, warm and proud. Devin Thompson, you listen to me right now. You did exactly the right thing. You helped someone who needed help, even when it cost you something important. That's who you are, and that's who I raised you to be. But Grandma, I really needed this job. We need this job. Your medical bills. We'll get paid somehow just like they always have. Baby, there will be other jobs, other interviews. But there won't be other chances to be the kind of man your parents would be proud of. You already are that man. Devin felt tears prickling at the corners of his eyes. They gave me another appointment next Friday, but I could tell the receptionist thought I was wasting their time. Well, then next Friday you'll show them who you really are. Clean shirt, clean hands, 15 minutes early, and the same good heart you had today. I hope so, Grandma. I really hope so. I know so. Now come home and let me fix you some lunch. You sound like you need some of my cornbread and some of my hugs. Devin smiled for the first time since leaving Robert's car. That sounds perfect. Grandma, I'm on my way. As he stood up to catch the next bus, Devin tried to hold on to his grandmother's words. Maybe she was right. Maybe doing the right thing would work out somehow. But as he watched the Sterling building disappear behind him, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just let the best opportunity of his life slip through his fingers for the sake of helping a stranger change a tire. The bus arrived, and Devin climbed aboard, settling into a seat near the back. Through the window, he watched the nice part of downtown give way to more familiar neighborhoods. Tomorrow, he'd start looking at the want ads again. Tomorrow, he'd start over. But today, he'd helped someone who needed help, and maybe, just maybe, that had to count for something. Part 5. The Revelation. Friday morning came too quickly and too slowly at the same time. Devin had spent the entire week replaying the previous Friday in his head, wondering if he'd made the right choice, wondering if this second interview would even matter. He'd applied to 12 more jobs during the week, but his heart wasn't really in it. The Sterling position was the one he wanted, the one that could change everything for him and his grandmother. This time, Devin arrived at the downtown bus stop a full hour early. He wasn't taking any chances. His suit was freshly dry cleaned, his shoes were polished to a mirror shine, and he'd gotten a haircut the day before. In his folder were 3 crisp new copies of his resume, printed at the library again, but this time with better paper that the librarian had recommended. As he walked the familiar route to the Sterling building, Devin noticed things he'd missed the week before. A small coffee shop with people reading newspapers by the window. A flower vendor setting up his cart on the corner. The way the afternoon light hit the glass buildings and made everything look golden and full of possibility. He was so focused on not being late that he almost missed the black Mercedes parked outside a small deli 2 blocks from the Sterling building. But something about it caught his eye, and he glanced over to see a familiar figure standing next to it, holding what looked like a sandwich and a cup of coffee. It was Robert. Devin's steps slowed as he recognized the older man who had thanked him so genuinely the week before. Robert was wearing another expensive-looking suit, but this one was perfectly clean and pressed. He looked relaxed, successful, like someone who belonged in this part of the city. For a moment, Devin considered just walking past. He was 45 minutes early for his interview, and he didn't want anything to go wrong this time. But something about Robert's presence felt like more than a coincidence. "Robert?" Devin called out as he approached. The older man looked up from his coffee and broke into a wide smile. "Devin, what are you doing in this neighborhood? I have that interview I mentioned last week, the one I was late for because I stopped to help you." Robert's expression immediately turned serious. "Oh no. Please tell me they gave you another chance." "They did. Today at 3 p.m. I'm just making sure I'm really early this time." "Good for you. I've been thinking about you this week, wondering how everything turned out." Robert took a sip of his coffee. "I felt terrible that helping me made you late for such an important opportunity." Devin shook his head. "You don't need to feel bad about that. It was my choice, and honestly, even though it didn't work out the way I planned, I don't regret it. My grandmother always says that how you treat people when it's inconvenient says something about your character. She sounds like a wise woman. How is she doing, by the way? You mentioned she was having some health issues." "She's hanging in there. The medical bills are still piling up, but she keeps telling me not to worry about it. She's more concerned about me finding work than she is about her own problems." Devin adjusted his folder under his arm. "That's why this interview is so important. Sterling and Associates could be exactly the kind of opportunity I need." Robert nodded thoughtfully. "What do you know about the company?" "I've done a lot of research. They've been around for 30 years. They specialize in helping mid-sized businesses improve their operations. The founder started it after working at one of the big consulting firms and wanting to focus more on practical solutions than theoretical frameworks." Devin realized he was probably sharing more than necessary, but Robert seemed genuinely interested. "From what I've read, they really value people who understand how things work in the real world, not just in textbooks." "That's a good approach," Robert said. "Too many consultants have never actually run a business or worked in operations. They can tell you what should work in theory, but they've never dealt with the reality of making it work day to day." "Exactly. That's what I'm hoping they'll see in my warehouse experience. I may not have a business degree, but I've spent years figuring out how to make complicated systems actually function." Robert was quiet for a moment, studying Devin with an expression that was hard to read. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure. When you saw me with that flat tire last week, what really went through your mind? Be honest." Devin considered the question. "Honestly, my first thought was to keep walking. I knew I couldn't afford to be late, and helping you was going to make that almost inevitable. But then I looked at you standing there, and you reminded me of my grandfather. He passed away when I was 12, but I remember how lost he looked sometimes when technology or modern things confused him. He was this strong, capable man in so many ways, but put him in front of a computer or a car problem, and he'd get that same frustrated expression you had. And that's what made you stop? That, and something my grandmother always taught me. She said that the measure of a person isn't what they do when people are watching or when it's easy or when they'll get something out of it. It's what they do when no one's looking and it costs them something. Robert smiled. She really did raise you right. She did her best. Everything good about me comes from her. Devin checked his watch. I should probably head over to the building soon. I want to be there at least 15 minutes early, and I want to find a bathroom to make sure I look presentable. Of course. I don't want to make you late again. Robert extended his hand. It was really good seeing you, Devin. I hope this interview goes exactly the way you want it to. Devin shook his hand, struck again by the firmness and sincerity of Robert's grip. Thanks. And thanks again for last week. I know it sounds weird, but helping you reminded me of who I want to be, even when it's hard. It doesn't sound weird at all. Devin walked the remaining 2 blocks to the Sterling building with a strange sense of calm. Seeing Robert again had felt like a good sign, though he couldn't exactly explain why. Maybe it was just nice to know that his choice to help had meant something to someone. The same security guard was at the front desk, and he recognized Devin immediately. Back for round 2, eh? Yes, sir. Hopefully this time will go better. I'm sure it will. You're here nice and early this time. Devin took the elevator up to the 14th floor, his stomach fluttering with nerves, but his mind clear. Whatever happened, he was ready. He'd done everything he could to prepare, and he'd arrived early enough to collect himself before the interview. The same receptionist was at the front desk, and she looked up as he approached with what might have been surprise. Mr. Thompson, you're quite early. Yes, ma'am. I wanted to make sure there were no issues this time. She glanced at the clock, which showed 2:45 p.m. Well, punctuality is certainly important. Let me call back and see if Mr. Sterling is available to see you a few minutes early. As she picked up the phone, Devin tried to steady his breathing. This was it. His second chance, maybe his last chance, to make the impression he should have made a week ago. The receptionist spoke quietly into the phone, then looked up with an expression Devin couldn't quite read. Mr. Sterling will see you now. Just go down the hall to the corner office. Devin thanked her and walked down the carpeted hallway, his portfolio in hand and his head held high. The corner office door was open, and he could see a figure behind a large mahogany desk silhouetted against floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the city. He knocked on the doorframe. Mr. Sterling, I'm Devin Thompson. The figure behind the desk stood and turned around. Devin's world stopped. It was Robert, the same Robert who had stood helplessly beside his Mercedes with a flat tire. The same Robert who had thanked him so sincerely for his help. The same Robert who had just been standing outside the deli, asking about his grandmother and wishing him luck with his interview. Robert's face broke into the biggest smile Devin had ever seen. Hello, Devin. I was wondering if you'd show up. Devin stood frozen in the doorway, his mind racing to process what was happening. You're Mr. Sterling? Robert Sterling, yes, founder and CEO of Sterling and Associates. Robert walked around his desk with his hand extended. And you, Devin Thompson, are exactly the kind of person we've been looking for. I don't understand, Devin said, though he shook Robert's offered hand automatically. Please, sit down. Let me explain. Robert gestured to a comfortable chair across from his desk. When you helped me last Friday, I was on my way to a board meeting, a very important board meeting that I couldn't afford to be late for. But I was completely stuck, and my phone was dead, and I had no idea what to do. Devin sat down, still trying to process the situation. But you said your name was Robert. It is Robert. Robert Sterling. I didn't lie about anything, Devin. I just didn't mention that I happened to own the company you were interviewing with. You knew? Last Friday you knew I was coming here? Robert settled back in his chair. Not until you mentioned Sterling and Associates while you were changing my tire. And then, when you told me about your background, your experience, your grandmother, the way you approached problems. I realized I was getting a much better interview than any formal meeting could have provided. Devin shook his head, still struggling to understand. But I was late. I missed the appointment. You were late because you were helping someone who needed help. Someone who, as it turns out, was in a position to offer